So, if you're new to us, we are just getting into a new series called The Light of the World. And we can go ahead and bring up my stuff. Yeah, there we are. Brilliant color is today's theme, which we're going to jump into here in a minute. But you actually have a little handy handout in your bulletin. I think that got stuffed in there. It's like a two-sided thing with something like that. And, I started doing this a couple months ago. I wasn't doing it while I was gone, obviously, but now that I'm back, giving you this crosswalk guide. And, I'm keeping doing it because out of all the folks that come to crosswalk, hey, 2 of you were actually using this. So I thought, hey, we're going to keep it up then. If it was nobody, then I'd quit. But I hope that you'll actually put this to use this week. Right there on the top is the verse that we're looking at, that we're building this whole series. In fact, it's the next slide on the screen. Chris, if you want to help me with that. So this is the Message translation of Matthew 5:14-16. And it says, here's another way to put it. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on a hill. If I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm putting you on a light stand. Now that I've put you there on a hilltop, on a light stand, shine. Keep open house. Be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous Father in heaven. And on the next slide, this is a picture of where we're going today. So I'm going to talk about Immortal Diamonds, talk about my dirty solar panels, Lynn's wedding ring, talk about Max the Ragamuffin. I'm going to talk about children, Shiny Moses, and then end up with a so what question toward the end to see what you want to do with this. Immortal Diamonds. There's a thing, you probably heard of it, they're called diamonds. Apparently they're women's best friend. Is that true, ladies? Yeah, as far as we know? No? Okay, well, good for you. Lucky husband. Very good. Diamonds are gorgeous, right? And if we had Ed up here, he could tell us more than we could imagine about diamonds, since he's a jeweler. The idea is you get the right color, right clarity, the right carat, and all that stuff. And they shine brilliantly. That's the idea. I bought one for my wife when we got married, and it was a pretty good diamond. Are you wearing it today? All right, excellent. So we'll talk about that. Did she say no or yes? Oh, good. All right, good. Maybe she's telling me something. All right. Well, this diamond is this great, beautiful gemstone that's probably overpriced because there are more beautiful stones in the world today, but the way the market works, whatever is valuable maintains its value and all this stuff. In fact, there's another stone out there that is man's best friend. It's called cubic zirconia. Every cheap boyfriend's answer to prayer because it's so cheap. And the thing is that if you actually look at the brilliance between what can be created with cubic zirconia compared to your ordinary diamonds that are more or less available for most people, cubic zirconia actually is much more brilliant than diamonds. Did you know that? And actually, when you see a good diamond, what you see is not just white light refracting, but you see color. That's the sparkle that you get, is the color that's bouncing off. We think it's white light coming at us. Actually, the light of the sun is full of color, and diamonds reflect that color. But cubic zirconia does it much better. It's actually a more brilliant stone, this fake. And in fact, that's how you know you've got cubic zirconia. If it's too brilliant, it's fake. Isn't that something? Well, there's this idea of immortal diamond. A whole book has been written of it by a guy named Richard Rohr. And I want to read you a quote that he actually brought from Teresa of Avila, who was a mystic that lived centuries ago. Richard Rohr, I think, is one of the most brilliant minds of our day. He's a Franciscan priest by his heritage, but the guy is tapped into stuff that's just amazing and deep. And he has this concept that we, you and me, are immortal diamonds. That we're not made just as long as this flesh and blood lasts, but we have this eternal reality, this soul thing with us. And our point of life is to shine in brilliance, to reflect the light of God, the light of life, same thing. and to just let that emanate in all of its brilliant color. That's the idea. We are immortal diamonds. You are an immortal diamond. The question I'm raising is, how brilliant are you? Are you reflecting the light of God? How brilliant is your color? Or has something happened to it? In her interior castle, that's a book that St. Teresa of Avila wrote, she said, the soul is spacious, plentiful, and its amplitude is impossible to exaggerate. The sun here radiates to every part, and nothing can diminish its beauty. And Richard Rohr asks that, this is your soul. It is God in you. This is your true self. This is what you were meant for. So when Jesus says you're the light of the world, he's not saying, well, you might be the light of the world. No, he's saying you are the light of the world. The question is, do you know it? Do you know that you are an immortal diamond? Do you know that you have a greater capacity for brilliance than maybe you've given yourself credit for? Or perhaps your brilliance has been toned down, which leads me to my dirty solar panels. So I had solar installed on my house almost a year ago. And part of the deal is that you're supposed to clean them about once a year. And it's not a big deal to do. It took me all of about 15 minutes to get up on my house and get a bucket out with some water and a little mop head and just kind of go over them and stuff to get the dirt off. And not a big deal. After I was done, in fact, the next day, I was just curious. Wonder if by cleaning these panels, they look kind of dusty, I guess, once I got up there. And honestly, I didn't even notice that they were dusty because my neighbors who have solar panels, mine didn't look any worse than theirs. So I was like, oh, that must be all right. Well, the next day, after my little app, picked up how much energy I'd produced, after I cleaned off my panels, it was amazing. 15 minutes work saved me, or generated 10 to 15% more power in one day. That 15 minutes made that much difference. And I never would have known to do it, except for I remembered that I was supposed to do it. And I was just curious to see if just a little cleaning up is going to make much of a difference, and it did. And so then I got to thinking, if I would have just carried on and just compared myself to my neighbor across the street and one down the block, I never would have known that I had a problem. Never would have known that I was sacrificing energy just by simply paying attention. And I wonder if we do that sometimes with our lives. I wonder if slowly and surely dust kind of settles on us. And we don't really notice it first. It's not really recognizable because the percentage difference is so small in our reflective capacity or our energy production. But over time, I wonder if we sacrifice some brilliance that way. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, some of you can't stand metaphors. Let me just speak very quickly. This is what I'm talking about. I think when we follow Jesus really well, I think we are much more apt to be tied to God really well. So if we look at Jesus and we say, that guy, out of all the people in the world, not real likely to nail it. He was poor, at least initially uneducated, not a great time in history to be a poor Jewish guy in ancient Israel. And yet, what happened with him? He became, one of the most, in my opinion, the most profound, connected people to God that's ever walked the planet. I want some of that. I want to experience as much of what he learned as possible. So what I'm talking about with all this imagery and metaphor is simply trying to help us get to, are we walking in the footsteps of Jesus or are we not? Because if we are, I think we're going to be brilliant. And if we're not, it's like throwing dust on our solar panels. Has any dust made it onto your solar panel? So a couple years ago, Lynn loves it when I do this. I got this crazy idea. Oh man, I love going into jewelers, and they sucker you into their shops. Hey, can we clean your rings for you? Oh yeah, sure, that's great. It's free and everything. And so they put it in that little fancy box that vibrates and stuff. And within just moments, it's like you got a brand new piece of jewelry. It's amazing. So I was like, I got to have one of those. So I got on Amazon, and lo and behold, for $15, I found probably not nearly as good a quality as Ed Barker's, but I found one of these gizmos that buzzes like crazy. You put the solution in there, and it works pretty darn good. So I got it, and you know, Lena's used to seeing boxes from Amazon come to our house regularly because that's where I get stuff for the church delivered most of the time. And so one day the box comes, and I'm waiting for this, and I say, "Oh, you're gonna be excited about this." So I pull out the box, and she's like, "Oh, good grief, how much did you spend on that?" I'm like, "It's only $15, let's give it a shot." And so I had her give me her wedding rings and stuff, and you know what? It worked. And I put these things in there, and I did it one round for like a couple minutes, and they came back looking really good. And then I read the directions, so I thought, well, that'd be a good idea to actually know how to use it. And they actually had some recommendations that I did, and I gave it another whirl, and they even got more brilliant. You know what was amazing to me about that? Is Lynn and I, you know, we take walks almost every day together. And we usually hold hands while we're walking around. And sometimes she's wearing a ring, and I see her ring on her finger all the time. And I've seen that ring on her finger for 25 years, almost. And I never noticed there was any problem with her rings. They look good to me. They look like diamonds. I was happy with that. But you know what I realized is that over time, you may know where I'm going, but stuff got on those diamonds. Now my wife, she washes her hands all the time, and yet there was still stuff on that diamond that just slowly got there over time. Some dirt and stuff got into the mountings. And when that happened, it kept the reflection and the refraction from really doing its job. So you couldn't really see the brilliance of the diamond that was there all along. And you only realize this when you clean it up. Because when I walk around and see everybody else's dull diamonds, it looks fine to me. But what a difference when we actually do the work of realizing, I wonder if it's time to do some maintenance. I wonder if it's time just to take stock and buff it out. I wonder if it's time to mop off the solar panels because they're going to create more energy from the sun. I wonder if it's time to put the wedding ring in the buzzy box and let it do its cleaning thing just to see how beautiful it's supposed to be. Never disappointed when I do that. It's just the way it works. And so I wonder, in our own lives, have we allowed just very, not, you're all good people, I know that, you're here, you must be awesome, right? And I believe that. But you and me together here in this place who are trying to get it done right and trying to do a good job with our lives and trying to follow God, I wonder even if we do that right, I wonder if it's possible a little grime gets on us along the way that makes it very difficult for the God colors to really break through. I wonder if some things sneak in and we don't notice it because we look pretty much the same as a lot of people around us. And it seems okay. But I wonder if when we take stock, if when we spend time buffing it out a little bit, mopping it up, cleaning it up, I just wonder if we'll be a little bit more brilliant. And I kind of think we will. But I kind of think we don't like to do that. Because we don't like to do that. We often don't like to take stock. We don't really want to look in the mirror. We want to look at everybody else. And so long as we're doing better than one or two people, we're feeling pretty good about ourselves, right? At least I'm not that guy or that gal or whatever. And I think that's a mistake. I think there's no value in not cleaning ourselves up, not taking stock, not taking a hard look now and then, and not allowing ourselves to be buffed out. There's this story out of the Ragamuffin Gospel, which I really do hope that you'll read. And I'm not going to read you this whole account, but it is pretty marvelous. And it deals with a guy named Max. Now, the author of the Ragamuffin Gospel, he's passed on now, but he was a recovering alcoholic. And had a remarkable ministry and incredibly honest and vulnerable and transparent in his life. And he talked about one of the times that he was going through recovery. It's like 1975. And he's in this this group treatment center north of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and it kind of describes it as this split-level kind of rec room, you know, and the group would meet in the lower level, and the upper level was for hospitality and whatnot. And he said he'll never forget, in 1975, in the spring, when it was Max's turn to be on the hot seat. The hot seat is, in this environment, as he describes it, as you're in a circle with all the other people who are in the treatment together, and the guy in the hot seat is the one who has to answer all the questions. And the facilitator of the group, who's gone through this stuff and well-trained, they have carte blanche to ask you anything. So it was Max's turn. Now, Max was a well-to-do businessman. He'd made a name for himself in his town. He had jingle in his pocket. He had social respect. But he had a problem, which is why he was in this recovery center. So the facilitator just launches in. Well, tell me, Max, how long have you been drinking like a pig? And immediately Max is like, well, there's no need to get hostile already. And he says, okay, I'll rephrase that. How long have you really been drinking like a pig, Max? And he goes on and continues to ask questions. And Max says, this is how much I drink every day. Sometime around lunch, I'll have a couple of cocktails, and then before I go home, I'll stop by an establishment and have a couple more drinks. And then I'll go home, and my wife and I will have a couple more drinks before we have dinner. And then before we go to bed, my wife and I will have 2 more drinks. So 8 drinks a day, that's it. Like, you don't have a problem. You know what I mean? And immediately after he says, this is what I drink, not a drop more, not a drop less, the facilitator says, liar. You're a filthy liar. And the guy was unfazed, unruffled. He just says, that's all I do. I'm telling you, this is the truth. I have no reason to lie to you. No need to get indignant here. He says, are you sure about that? He says, absolutely. I've just told you what I do. And he threw in some other social grace kind of things to try to get people to like him. And then he asked for a phone to be wheeled into the room. That was back in the days when you had to have a phone wheeled into the room. And so this phone is right there, and it was a speaker phone, modern technology in 1975. So everybody could hear the conversation that's going on. He said, well, I'm just going to make a couple phone calls just to verify your story. And so he calls up Max's bartender at the place he would go every day before he went home from work. And he said, hi, so-and-so, this is so-and-so from the treatment center, and I have full permission to ask you some questions about Max's drinking behavior. Is it okay if I ask you some questions? Oh, yeah, I guess so. How much does Max drink, usually on his way home? And the bartender was like, are you sure you've got permission to do this? And the guy's like, I have a signed affidavit that gives me permission to ask you this question. So, if you don't mind, about how many drinks do you serve Max, on his way home from work? And he says, well, I got to tell you, I love Max. He's a great guy. Everybody loves him in the bar, and he usually comes in. He always tips me really well before he goes, and he usually has about 8 cocktails before he goes home. And Max is realizing, oh, okay, well, that did not go as planned. And so, he said, thank you very much, and that call was ended, and the facilitator was just looking at Max like, well, what's going on here? And he tried to laugh it off and joke it away like, oh, well, now and again, boys will be boys, and et cetera, et cetera. And he says, well, I got another phone call I want to make. And so he calls his wife and says, hey, this is so-and-so from the treatment center, and, can I just ask you a few questions about your husband's drinking problem? And she said, of course, what do you want to know? Well, tell me, how much you usually drink. And she describes it, and of course, it's much more than Max had described. So what's going on here, Max? Max doesn't want to be seen. He doesn't want the dust to be noticed. He doesn't want the grime to be recognized. He wants to hide. He wants to be in denial of what is real. He'd rather stay diminished. He'd rather stay a little grimy than come into the light. That's what's going on. So, he got more and more information about Max and asked Max, kind of beforehand, hey, Max, in fact, some of the other group members, that's part of the deal, is everybody gets to ask questions because they're all struggling and they all can call the lie out, pretty easily because they've been there and they are there. And so one of the guys is like, well, hey, Max, do you keep any booze in the garage? And he said, well, of course, because I do a lot of entertaining, and so that's where I keep my stock. So I have, a full bevy of about everything you can imagine in the garage. But do you have any in the garage that, you take a little sip of now and then? And after, getting nailed a couple times by his wife, says, well, okay, I keep a fifth of gin, in the garage, just, if I'm doing the lawn work or whatever. Anywhere else? All right, in the medicine cabinet, in case I need to get up at night and have trouble sleeping, I got that. Anything else? Maybe at work? Well, okay, I've got a little something in my desk drawer in the office, in case stress, gets too high or whatever. Facilitator asks his wife, has Max's drinking, ever really led to any significant problems? At that, Max's face starts to turn white, and she says, well, there was Christmas Eve. So the facilitator asks Max, what happened Christmas Eve? And Max is like, he gets different. He's changed. He's like, I don't even remember exactly what happened Christmas Eve. So the facilitator says to the wife, do you mind telling us what's going on? Oh, I thought you knew. No, let us know. Well, my husband took our daughter, who was 8 years old, Christmas shopping. He didn't have time to get a gift, and so he thought, hey, I'll just, I know she's been eyeing this pair of shoes at the store that are expensive, and after work, I'll just pick her up and take her to the store and give her plenty of cash to buy the shoes and pocket a little bit on the side, and she'll be happy, which is exactly what happened. He got the daughter, went to the shoe store, and she got this pair of shoes that she'd been eyeing and was so happy to come back into their nice new warm truck in the middle of winter in Minnesota. It's very, very cold, like 8 degrees that day, and was just thrilled. And Max felt like the dad of the year. Just made his little girl's Christmas. Then he said to his daughter, hey, I'm just going to stop in at the bar on the way home like I usually do, just to wish everybody a Merry Christmas before we go home. If that's all right. And she's like, yeah, that's fine. And Max was aware, hey, this is my daughter. I'm going to leave her in the car. It's 1975. And so it's a nice new truck. It's a safe automobile. And so he leaves the car running while she's in there so he can go just have a couple of drinks before he goes home. And he leaves it on and locks the doors so nobody can get in and keeps the heat on, so no problem there. Then it's late afternoon, 3, 4 o'clock. And he fully anticipates to be back in an hour or so. Well, the wife continues and says, well, it turns out he ran into some old military buddies in the bar. And they got on to drinking, and they lost track of time. And it was 8 hours before Max made it back to his car. And the car had run out of gas. And the little girl was, deathly cold. And they rushed her to the hospital. And they had to amputate the ends of a couple of fingers. And she'll be deaf the rest of her life. At that point, Max began to sob like a baby. He found himself in the fetal position on the floor in front of the group. And the facilitator said, let's get out of here. And they went up to the upper level of this split-level rec room kind of building. And then they watched the facilitator go back down to Max, who was sobbing like a baby on the floor. And the facilitator approached him and kicked him in the ribs and said, there's a window and there's a door. Get the hell out of here as fast as you can. I don't care which way you want to go. I will not tolerate any liars in this recovery program. Because in the recovery program, they were very serious about taking an honest inventory of owning what was really happening in their lives, of not lying anymore about the state of affairs. Well, Max, this was a wake-up moment, as you can imagine. And he begged and begged and begged to be allowed to stay in the program. And he was allowed to stay in the program. And the transformation, that Brennan Manning describes was unbelievable. And it can happen, and it does happen. And we have many people in our church that can tell that story on their own, which is awesome. But I think we're all a lot like Max. Your deal may not be alcohol, but we live in the United States of America, in an incredibly beautiful, lush, wealthy part of that United States of America. And we're all a little bit something. We're all a little bit spoiled. We're all a little bit affected by the culture around us. We're all a little bit like everybody else, and we don't even know how dusty our panels have become, how grimy our diamond has become. We're not anywhere near aware of how our brilliance has been compromised simply because we haven't been paying attention. It reminds me of some scriptures in 1 John. These are going to come up on your screen here. If you want a little peak challenge for the week, I'll try to remember to do this on Facebook. Here's your challenge. Read 1 John. Well, you can read the Gospel of John too, but read 1 John. It's a lot faster. It's only 5 chapters, and I dare you to read it a few times this week. Read it every day this week, and just see what happens to you. These are some verses that come out of 1 John. So first at the top, it says, "This is the message we heard from Jesus and now declare to you. God is light, and there is no darkness in him at all. So we are lying if we say we have fellowship with God, but go on living in spiritual darkness. We are not practicing the truth. But if we are living in the light, as God is in the light, then we have fellowship with each other, and the blood of Jesus, his Son, cleanses us from all sin." The next chapter, in 1 John chapter 2, he goes on to say, "If anyone claims, I am living in the light, but hates a Christian brother or sister, that person is still living in darkness. Anyone who loves another brother or sister is living in the light and does not cause others to stumble. But anyone who hates another brother or sister is still living and walking in darkness. Such a person does not know the way to go, having been blinded by the darkness." By the way, unless that's Jesus calling, make sure he sounds your phone. But by the way, we live in a binary world. We live in a world where, especially in political seasons, where everything is black and white. Where if you're a Republican, then all Democrats are straight from the pit of hell. And if you're a Democrat, surely Republicans are the same. And I just want you to think about what you're hearing here. And when you hear with great passion, either political candidates on both sides doing character assassination on the other, and speaking with hatred toward people groups all around the world, whichever party that's in, I just hope a red flag comes. Because that is the normal landscape of America right now, of being okay with this binary thinking. And if you're on Facebook, now I'm starting to see more and more people putting a post out saying, "Come on, guys." I had an old college friend just put out a post yesterday saying, "Guys, we're losing friendships over political candidates here. This should not be so." And I've heard it from several pockets of my Facebook friends just saying, "Enough is enough already." And I think Jesus would be saying the same thing. Enough is enough already. If anyone claims I'm living in the light but hates a Christian brother or sister, that person is still living in darkness. There's some cleaning up to do. There's some buffing out to do. Later on in that same chapter, John goes on and says, "Do not love this world nor the things it offers you. For when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our achievements and possessions. These are not from the Father, but are from this world. And the world is fading away, along with everything that people crave. But anyone who does what pleases God will live forever." So the question for me is, what do you crave? Because maybe your cravings are going to help you discern whether or not it's time to clean the solar panels or put the diamond into the buzzy box, because they need to be cleaned. Maybe you just never thought about it like that before. It goes on. This is toward the end of his book. And he says, "Dear friends, let us continue to love one another, for love comes from God. Anyone who loves is a child of God and knows God, but anyone who does not love does not know God, for God is love. God showed how much he loved us by sending his one and only Son into the world that we might have eternal life through him. This is real love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as a sacrifice to take away our sins. Morton Kelsey wrote about the church. The church is not a museum for saints, but a hospital for sinners. Brennan Manning continues, the good news means we can stop lying to ourselves. The sweet sound of amazing grace saves us from the necessity of self-deception. It keeps us from denying that though Christ was victorious, the battle with lust, greed, and pride still rages within us. As a sinner who has been redeemed, I can acknowledge that I am often unloving, irritable, angry, and resentful with those closest to me. When I go to church, I can leave my white hat at home and admit that I failed. God not only loves me as I am, but also knows me as I am. Because of this, I don't need to apply spiritual cosmetics to make myself presentable to him. I can accept ownership of my poverty and powerlessness and neediness. Can you? Can you be that honest with yourself, honest before God, recognizing that this is your loving parent, if we use that metaphor? And I hope I've communicated this to my kids, and if not, they're going to hear it again this morning, that no matter what they do, no matter what you do, I will never, ever, ever love you any less than I do. It will not happen. I can't make that change because you're my kids. You and I are God's kids. That love will never go away. So even if we're disappointed in ourselves, even if we struggle, even if we know we're blowing it, even if right now we're in a place that we know Jesus would never lead us to. Let me say that again. You may be in some stuff right now. And you're saying here as you sing songs, and you may even say at the very end of today our sort of ongoing baseline motto, go be Jesus. And with all your heart you want to say, yeah, I love God, I love my faith, I want to go be Jesus. But let me ask you this. Is there anything in your life right now that you absolutely are certain that Jesus would never lead you into? That's the kind of question we need to ask. That's the kind of question we need to wonder about, because that leads us to dusting off the panels, to putting the diamond in the buzzy box, that we might be more brilliant. Do you know you are so loved by God that you can do that? And not with this huge guilt trip, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I mean, that's good. Confession, apology, and humility are good. That's kind of the point. But not to stay there. You know, Brennan Manning talks about children, and he uses this reference about Jesus saying, let the little children come unto me. And he has a brilliant insight on this. What he really meant was this. The children are our model because they have no claim on heaven. If they are close to God, it is because they are incompetent, not because they are innocent. If they receive anything, it can only be as a gift. In the time of Jesus, I mean, everybody loves their kids, hopefully, but in terms of social rights and privileges, they were to maybe be seen, but definitely not heard. And when Jesus says, let the children come unto me, he is welcoming them into the very presence of God. Not because of anything they've done, not because of any sense of entitlement. And the children come out of their incompetence because they trust the love of God. That's where we are. That's where you and I are. We're hearing the voice of Jesus say, children, come. You and I are those children. There's a really interesting passage in the book of Exodus, chapter 34. Context is the people are on their way to the promised land. And they're forming their community and their cultural identity. They don't even know who they are yet. I mean, nothing's really been written down. They have stories, etc., but no laws on the books, no real structure for how it's all going to go. And so they seek God, and this is where Moses goes up to the mountaintop. And on one of these particular occasions, he was gone for a long time and getting the 10 Commandments. And when he comes down off the mountain, Mount Sinai, he comes down to the leaders of Israel, and the leaders of Israel freaked out. You know why they freaked out? Because he was glowing. He'd been up with God in this moment, in the presence and the glory of God. And he'd been in it long enough, deep enough, so thoroughly enough that it was reflecting off of him brilliantly. And it freaked them out, so he had to wear a head covering because they were so freaked out. Wouldn't that be something? By the way, I think this does happen, not in a weird sci-fi kind of way. You know, now and then you run across people who are just so tight with God. It just kind of emanates out of them. I wish I could say it was like this all the time with me, but I don't think it is. I wish it were. I'm trying to walk in such a way that it's more, not less. I remember one time, I'm in no way bragging about myself because I've got plenty of baggage and skeletons in my closet for sure. But I remember this one time, and it surprised me because I'm with another pastor, and we're actually going to go into kind of a difficult conversation. And the waitress comes and waits on us, and she asks what we do because it was lunchtime. And my pastor friend, both of us know we never give it up that we're pastors because that ruins everything. So, you know, she asked, "So what would you guess? What do you think we do?" And she gave it her best shot. And then finally, my friend says, "Well, talking to me, he's a pastor." And you know what she said? And again, this is a God thing, not a me thing. She said, "I knew it. I knew it because I could just sense there was something going on here." I don't know why. That happened when I almost had back surgery too. That's why I have confidence that this thing is real. That sometimes I think when we are so dialed into God and walking so closely with God, I actually think that we shine a little more brilliantly and probably don't even know it. In fact, when we do know it, that's probably not God. You know what I mean? My point in asking you guys to think about the dustiness of your solar panels and the griminess of your diamonds isn't to make you feel guilty or wallow in self-pity or walk around with your head down low. That is not the point. The point is this, that when we get to a place of honesty with God, that we recognize that not one of us are anything but ragamuffins in a good way, that we realize that God loves us just as we are. When we get to that place without any pretense, we just found our strength. We just found our foundation that will never, ever, ever let go of you. That's where the sweet spot is. What does the Lord require of you? But to love mercy. To walk humbly, love mercy, and to do justly. To walk humbly. The only way we walk humbly with God is if we continually, daily take stock and recognize and pray to God, "God, I know that I do not have any right to you. I know that you are a gift to me. And because of that gift, I want to do everything I can to walk in your way. Because you are life. You are the foundation. You are the truth. You're where it's at." That's why we go be Jesus. Because that leads us to that. We become shinier. We become more brilliant. And that is the thing I want to tell you is in our culture, which is often so driven by self-concern and self-motivation, what's in it for me? Don't you get what's in it for you? Don't you see what Jesus is inviting you into when he says to you, you are the light of the world, to reflect God's brilliant colors in all of their glory? Do you understand what's being communicated to you? This is your life. You don't have to settle for what the rest looks like. Even though they look okay, you don't have to settle for less than the most energy production. You don't have to settle for less than the most brilliant color reflecting off of the light of God. Why wouldn't you want that? That's where the joy is. And the other thing is, not only is it for you, but when you do that, when you nail that, when you're brutally honest before God, when you walk humbly in that kind of way, where there's no longer any room for arrogance, where there's no longer any room for you to judge or criticize other people because you know you really can't. And that's not the tone of Jesus anyway. When you do that, you make the difference in the world that God had in mind. Because the light of God is reflecting in you and through you. And they get it. And they just might see the light because of that. So we're going to have a moment for you, a song that's going to show up on the screen. And I mentioned this in my blog for you. Give you a link to the video you're about to see. As well as from Richard Rohr, he has 12 steps or 12 keys to living more the resurrected life, which is the brilliant life. And that's in my blog as well. It'll be released later today. And I hope you'll check it out because he's got brilliant stuff. And I really do believe that you and I want to be brilliant. Not for our own arrogance, certainly not because of who we are, but because we're starting to get a glimpse more and more of just how powerful and brilliant this light is that we're trying to walk with. And if we can get a little more of that in, shine a little more of that out, everybody wins. So this song is all about being honest. And it just takes a few minutes, and it has a few questions on the top of the screen. How's God nudging you right now? I want you to think about that. Why do you think God's nudging like that? And what do you think God wants to do with you in response? So check out the video, and then I'll be back to close in prayer when we're done.
Truth is harder than a lie. The dark seems safer than the light. And everyone has a heart that loves to hide. I'm a mess and so are you. We've built walls nobody can get through. Yeah, it may be hard, but the best thing we could ever do, bring your brokenness and I'll bring mine, 'cause love can heal what hurt divides, and mercy's waiting on the other side. If we're honest, if we're honest, don't pretend to be something that you're not. Living life afraid of getting caught. There is freedom found when we lay our secrets down at the cross, at the cross. So bring your brokenness and I'll bring mine, 'cause love can heal what hurt divides, and mercy's waiting on the other side. If we're honest, if we're honest, it would change our lives, it would set us free. It's what we meant to be. So bring your brokenness and I'll bring mine, 'cause love can heal what hurt divides, and mercy's waiting on the other side. If we're honest, if we're honest, if we're honest,
Would you pray with me? So I'd like you to take just a moment and respond to God on your own in silence. And you might not know how to do that. All I'm asking you to do is just take stock. We're in the presence of God. God loves you. It's not going to change. It's safe. Nobody's looking. Nobody can read your mind. God sees everything. So why not see it with God? It's really what confession is all about, is just agreeing with God about what is there, what is true. And maybe you need to start with behaviors that you know are behaviors Jesus would never lead you to. Maybe you've got sucked into the greed thing, the self-centered thing. Maybe you found yourself being critical of other people, judgmental. Maybe you do have an addiction thing that you need to be honest about. It's a good place to start. Just say, God, I need help. Help us be honest, God. We lay ourselves before you as ragamuffins. We hear your word that you love us like a healthy parent loves their child. And God, we are so grateful that we could count on you to be constant faithfulness, constant love, constant grace. By nothing we've done on our own, but just because you love us. After we get over our guilt and our shame, God, which you want to remove from us, then help us start to see with new eyes about what it might look like to build a life based on this kind of radical humility. Not humiliation, but humility. Where we know we are grounded in your love, where our self-esteem is rooted in our identity with you and nothing else. Our sense of security is not about our portfolios, about our zip codes, about the cars we drive. It is in your faithfulness over our lives. How might that free us to love more freely? God, help us. Help us radiate your brilliant color. God, as we choose to walk humbly with you going forward, as we hear your invitation welcoming us into marvelous light, collectively we pray that you shine through us. Not that we would boast, but that we could just simply point back to your emanating light. Say, I just thank God, because God has welcomed me, and he welcomes everybody. May we be your children of light.